All right, today we are diving into some real heavyweights of the global economy, multinational companies. And look, these aren't just big businesses. We're talking about massive, integrated global operations that manage incredibly complex supply chains, shape labor markets, and honestly, they can wield power that rivals entire governments. So let's get into it. When you really get down to it, there's this central tension. Are these companies these incredible engines for global growth, lifting entire countries out of poverty? Or are they actually agents of exploitation, getting rich at the expense of local communities and economies? That's really the core question we're going to try and unpack today.
So here's our game plan for this explainer. It's a three-parter. First up, we're going to nail down what an MNC actually is. Then we'll dig into the real reasons that push them to expand all over the world. And finally, and this is the most important part, we're going to analyze their really complex, kind of two-faced impact on the countries they move into. Okay, to really understand these giants, you first have to understand the world they live in. It's a massive global stage, so let's set the scene.
You just can't talk about MNCs without talking about globalization. It's basically the growing connection between all our economies, making borders, at least economically, way more permeable. This whole interconnected world, well, that's the ocean these massive corporate ships sail on. It's what allows them to thrive.
So, what is an MNC, really? The most important part of the definition is this. It's a company based in one home country that actively owns and runs physical operations in other host countries. We're talking actual factories, stores, research labs. It's not just about selling your stuff overseas. It's about putting down roots and having a real operational footprint there.
And it is so easy to underestimate just how many of these companies exist. Get this. Some research suggests there are around 82,000 businesses around the world that actually fit the definition of an MNC. They're like this whole other layer of the global economy.
Now, here's where the scale of their influence really hits you. All those companies together are involved in something like 40% of all international trade. Just let that sink in. That one stat right there tells you why it's so critical to understand how they work.
So, with that kind of incredible power, why would countries not just welcome them, but actually compete with each other to get their investment? Well, on paper, the benefits for a host country's economy can look amazing. And that's exactly why governments often roll out the red carpet.
The promise is absolutely huge. For starters, MNCs create jobs, lots of them, directly and indirectly. They might build or pay for new infrastructure like roads and power grids. And then there are the less obvious benefits, like transferring skills. Think about Japanese car makers in the UK. They didn't just build factories. They introduced management ideas like Kaizen, or continuous improvement, which boosted productivity for everyone. You add more choices for consumers and new business for local suppliers, and yeah, you can see the appeal. But, and you knew there was a but coming, right? That super promising picture isn't the whole story. Not even close. For all those potential benefits, the power and sheer scale of MNCs can bring some really significant problems. So let's flip the coin over and look at the other side.
And the criticisms are serious. Yeah, they create jobs, but sometimes those jobs come with really low wages and the risk of worker exploitation, especially if local laws are weak. The environmental damage can be just devastating. I mean, look at the decades of oil spills linked to Shell's operations in Nigeria. These corporate giants can also crush smaller local businesses, and maybe worst of all, they can drain profits right out of the host country's economy.
This brings us to a really important concept, being footloose. It basically means an MNC isn't tied down to any one place. So if a government tries to raise the minimum wage or bring in tougher environmental laws, the company can just threaten to pack up and move somewhere else with weaker rules. This gives them enormous power over governments and creates what's known as a race to the bottom, with countries literally competing to offer the lowest standards. And that power is never, ever more controversial than when we start talking about taxes. Specifically, how MNCs use their global structure to legally, but, very controversially, pay as little tax as possible.
The main weapon in their financial toolkit is something called transfer pricing. It's a really sophisticated bit of accounting. Basically, a legal way to move profits around the world on paper, shifting them away from where the money was actually made. So how does this actually work? Well, imagine a company makes a ton of profit in Germany, which has high taxes. Then, a separate branch of the very same company, based in, say, low-tax Ireland, charges the German branch a ridiculously huge fee for, using the company logo. Presto, that fake cost wipes out the German profits, so they pay almost no tax there. The money suddenly shows up as profit in Ireland, where it gets taxed at a much, much lower rate.
And the amount of money we're talking about here is just staggering. One analysis suggested that just 5 big tech companies managed to shift about $30 billion in profits out of the UK alone between 2012 and 2017 using techniques just like this. That is a gigantic hole in a country's potential tax revenue.
So, when you pull it all back and look at the big picture, you see that fundamental tension again. Let's try to balance the scales one last time and wrap up what we've covered. We've kind of fulfilled our mission, right? We defined what an MNC is, we saw the forces that drive them to expand, and we've analyzed their dual nature. On one side of the scale, you have the promise: jobs, investment, new skills. But on the other side, you have the peril: exploitation, environmental damage, and as we just saw, these incredibly complex tax avoidance schemes that can really hurt a country's finances. And that really leaves us with a final big question to take away. As consumers, right, we get a lot of benefits: more choice, often lower prices because of these global companies. But if those same companies are legally avoiding billions in taxes, money that's meant to fund our hospitals, our schools, our roads, are we, without even realizing it, making a trade-off? It really makes you think about that delicate balance between a super efficient global market and the financial health of the very societies we live in. Definitely something to chew on.